Tenemos a alguien muy especial. Mirar, yo cuando empecé no era director de este festival, era responsable de Brigadoon hace unos 20 y pico años. Tuve una ilusión tremenda de tener como invitado de Brigadoon y también en algunas proyecciones en 35 milímetros a Charles Van, a una persona que a través de, en aquel tiempo de la Full Moon, pero anteriormente por Empire y en este festival muy especialmente productor de una película que causó impacto, que es Reanimator, nos había llevado a dimensiones a través del cine y del VHS tremendas, y es gracias a esas experiencias que tuvimos muchos somos lo que somos ahora, es decir, unos maníacos del cine y unos locos y entusiastas además de la serie B, ¿no? De eso tan estupendo y que ha dado tantas alegrías al cine fantástico, es hacer cine con presupuestos ajustados, pero muchísimas ideas, talento y pasión. Y Charles Van, yo creo que en todas sus facetas de productor y de director ha sido además perteneciendo a una gran dinastía cinematográfica, desde su padre, su hermano, que componen pues una de las experiencias desde la serie B más absolutamente asumida y utilizando efectos en su tiempo que nos maravillaban, trabajando con gente como Dave Allen en stop motion, en películas como Subespecies, como Los Robojogs, trabajando con gente como Stuart Gordon, con tantos y tantos nombres que nos vienen a la imaginación y que han pasado por ese festival. Por eso, 20 años después, tengo muchísimo placer de tener otra vez aquí a Charles Van, a un grande del cine fantástico. Ahora lo recibiremos, pero también quiero introducir a alguien que va a hablar más de todo ello, porque además tenemos todo este evento gracias a la plataforma Planet Horror, que es una gran oportunidad para disfrutar de las películas de Charles Van en mejores condiciones que nunca y de muchos otros títulos del cine que más nos gusta, que es el cine fantástico de terror. Y para hablar de todo ello y para también hablar de Charles Van, quiero llamar a David Fernández, socio fundador de Planet Horror y jefe de adquisiciones del canal. Bienvenido, David.
Muchas gracias, Ángel. Bueno, yo comentaros, primero daros las gracias a todos por estar aquí. Para los que no os conozcáis, Planet Horror, pues es la primera plataforma streaming bueno, dicen que de terror. Yo creo que vamos un poquito más allá del terror e intentamos dar todo aquello que nos gusta a los amantes del género. En Planet Horror os vais a encontrar un estreno semanal, películas del circuito de festivales, películas que nos apasionan e intentamos que os apasionen a vosotros. Todo ello a un precio impresionante, 19,99 al año. Y la verdad es que estamos muy contentos, muy satisfechos de haber llegado a donde estamos. Os invitamos a todos a que miréis, veáis y participéis de Planet Horror. Ahora os voy a dejar con un promocional de Planet Horror y, por supuesto, pues luego vendrá Charles y nos va a ilustrar en su masterclass.
Plataforma para los amantes del terror. Nuevos títulos inéditos y exclusivos del mejor cine de terror de todo el mundo. Por menos de 2 euros al mes, descubre las películas que solo encontrarás aquí para que las disfrutes cuando quieras y donde quieras. Para que después de verlas, quizá desees no haberlo hecho. Apaga la luz. Saca tus miedos y abre los ojos. Si puedes. Planet Horror. El horror vive en ti.
Okay, gracias, David. Y ahora, please welcome Charles Van.
Thank you very much. We can go to the table if you want, or whatever. We'll make it more casual. There's only one thing that I want to say. Normally, to make it a little bit more dynamic, maybe we'll skip the translation because I think everybody here more or less they can understand Charles' English, and it's going to be much more interesting to listening to you than a translator.
Io posso anche rispondere in italiano perché lo parlo. No, perché ho vissuto in Italia per tanti anni. Lei per qualche italiano qui, ma è simile, così capisco anche. Capisco.
So, com ha comentado Ángel antes, com ha comentat l'Àngel abans, tenim aquí a Charles Band, but it is actually you, Charles, who is the one who has to explain everything. You come from a very artistic family. If you don't mind to just elaborate a little bit about your origins and Mr. Albert Band and all this before we get into the meaty stuff that is Full Moon and everything. Again, ho farem tot en anglès, que jo crec que és més divertit i podem fer moltes més preguntes i moltes més coses divertides. So please, if you could elaborate a little bit about your origins.
Well, there's so much to talk about. So the family is an artistic family. My father was born in Paris, and his father was a very well-known artist. He did paintings and sculptures, and just before the Nazis invaded Paris, it is important, my grandfather got a job at the White House, and he came to Washington with my father, only child, and my grandmother to do a bust, a sculpture of President Roosevelt. He was there for a month, my grandfather, doing the bust. And during that time, the Nazis invaded Paris. So luckily, they became friendly, and the president gave them American citizenship. And that saved everyone's life. And they moved to California, where my father, with a love of cinema, started working for Warner Brothers. And then he worked for John Huston. And he made, with John, Red Badge of Courage and Asphalt Jungle. And he discovered with Houston Marilyn Monroe, who was a family friend. I'm giving you a very brief history of many years. And I was a little baby in the early 50s when they discovered Marilyn, and apparently she babysat for me. This is a true story. Well, I elaborate. Maybe she nurse-fed me. I like to think maybe, but probably not. But I don't know how you say that in Spanish. But anyway, so then my dad made movies. We made a movie in Sweden called Face of Fire. He made a movie called I Bury the Living, kind of a well-known horror movie. And he was not happy with the way cinema was going in the States in the 50s, so he said, we're going to go to Italy, well, first France and then Italy, for a year, because Hollywood on the Tiber, there was a lot of action. This was in the 60s, and a close friend of his was John Barrymore Jr., eventually the father of Drew Barrymore. And John was there making movies along with a lot of Americans, eventually Clint Eastwood, of course, but
John Barrymore, that's it.
Junior. Yeah. So as a little kid of 4 or 5, the idea of leaving your friends, he said, it's a year, just a year, we're coming back in a year. Well, the year turned out to be 16 years. So I came back, I grew up in Rome, that's why I speak the Italian, fell in love with everything Italian, European. I was a crazy entrepreneur. I opened a club at age 15, which was really 1-5, serving beer, completely against the law. But you just in Italy you maneuver. Giusto, è vero. And it was right near the Piazza de Fontana di Trevi. And I thought, well, I'm never going to get caught because the police were very nice. I looked older, and they didn't ask for permits. But then we all arrived, the Americans and English kids and Italians. We arrived in little motorini, made a casino, terrible noise. So the neighbors complained, and then they closed the club, which is a bummer because I sold lifetime memberships to the club. But as my beautiful girlfriend Robin Sidney, also an amazing actress, pointed out, it was the lifetime of the club, which is not true, but anyway. So then we went back to the States, and I had to make movies, and I again invented a crazy business and made some money, luckily, and made my first movie at age 24. It was called Mansion of the Doom with Richard Basehart and Gloria Graham and Lance Henriksen's first movie. My cinematographer was Andy Davis, who then went on to make big movies like The Fugitive. My editor, under a different name, was John Carpenter. And Stan Winston did the effects. And Stan remained a close friend till he...
It was Time Machine Award 50 years ago.
Really? Wow. Now, he's the nicest guy, and a great pity he left us early. 7 Academy Awards, right? But I don't know, I can go on. And made movies, and the artistic family. I should mention my brother, amazing composer, did a lot of the music for my movies. And my oldest son, Alex Band, has a band, sounds crazy, called The Calling, and they had a huge hit in 1999, 2000. If you heard the song, it was #1 radio hit of the decade. And then he toured with Santana. So when you go back, if you go to The Calling and see the song, it's called Wherever You Will Go. He had many songs. You've heard it. So he was a big rock and roll star, which was very nice. And he tours now. He's going to Europe again. He does 60 cities. So it's an artistic family, obviously, saved by the art, you know. Okay, so my earliest memories is I grew up on a movie set because my dad made movies. He made movies with, when we first got to Italy, well, in Sweden he made movies, in the States, but when I was 5 or 6 and beginning to understand, he made first epics. So he had me play, he thought I'd be a good actor, so he had me play the son of Steve Reeves because he made a Hercules movie and he made other Pablum movies and eventually westerns with, you know, Joe Cotton and Robert Ryan and Jimmy Mitchum. And but I first realized it because he put me, you know, as the son of Steve Reeves, the famous Hercules muscle man. And I hated acting. I just, they curled my hair. I thought, this is terrible. And I wanted to be the guys behind the camera, controlling the thing. So that was the moment I realized, okay, I definitely want to be in movies, but I'm not going to be an actor. So that was the time in my mind, I was like maybe 7. You know, I said, no, I can't do this. So since I'm sure so many of you are filmmakers or aspiring filmmakers, back then, okay, this is the late 50s, early 60s, everything, even for a kid, was bigger than life. So today you have little cameras and quick lights. Back then, it took 3 guys to move a light. The cameras were Mitchells. They weighed hundreds of pounds. Everything was, especially from the perspective of a 5-year-old, 6, huge, huge. Lots of people, lots of action. And my father, who worked with John Huston, took me to the set of The Bible, which they shot at the Dino De Laurentiis studios. I'm sure. We became friendly. So Dino and I had I could tell the story in Italian, but then no one would understand. But Dino says, come over. This is during I had a company called Empire in the 80s. And we became friendly, and he invited us to dinner with Martha. And during this dinner, I told him that, yes, I've been making these movies that have done very well in the early 80s, like Ghoulies and all those crazy movies. He said, well, you should make some movies in Italy. He said, if you want, I can arrange to sell you my studio. Now, Dino De Laurentiis was a master manipulator. You know, he owned things in different names and companies. And I said, really? This is Dino Città, you know, 50 hectares, Barbarella, the Bible, Dino Città. So I said, sure. So we went there. I went there. It was in ruins because he closed it. You know, it's a long story politically, blah, blah, blah. But he said we can do a deal because we were at the same bank, a crazy bank called Credit Lyonnais, which is another casino story. But anyway, I thought, oh my God, the dream of any kid is running a studio. And we were doing good. This was the late 80s where money was good and Empire was doing really well. We were making many movies, big deal with CBS Fox and Best on Video. So I went back and Dino and I had a meeting, and I actually can say I bought the studio. So we turned the studio into Empire Studios, and I owned it for 3 years, then over. It was finished. Had to sell it back to the bank. One of the reasons is any excuse to make a movie in Italy was good, because I love Italy. And when we started, the dollar was very weak. The lira was very strong. By the end, the dollar was super strong. It was more expensive, you know, to make movies in Italy than in our own town in Los Angeles. That plus other weird things. But for 3 years, we ran a studio, which was like a dream. I was a kid. We ran the studio. We did a Walk of Fame, which now, of course, is destroyed. We made movies like Troll and From Beyond and Dolls and Crawl Space and Arena and a whole bunch of really cool movies. And it ended. But that was the same studio I visited as a kid on the set of The Bible. You know, so it was interesting. Like, wow. Thank you. I have so many. Every movie has stories. I'll tell you just 2 quick ones for Meridian. So Meridian was shot at one of the early full moon movies, shot in the early 90s, at a castle that I actually owned for many years in Umbria. It was Castello di Giove. And we shot other movies. I shot Pit and the Pendulum there, and the last movie, well, one of the last movies was Castle Freak, all in the same castle. But Meridian was a dream because I wanted to make Harlequin romance movies. And we made this, and Sherilyn Fenn was I forget, there's an audience here. He's here. Why don't you go here? Go here, then it's better. Yeah, it's only fair. So Sherilyn Fenn was super hot because she made a movie called Twin Peaks, And there was another one that she had made that was sexy, beautiful. Anyway, and I cast another girl named Charlie, who was also a very wonderful actress. And it was Harlequin romance. But the story, which is a good one, is it's sort of a Beauty and the Beast, and this cursed English attractive man turns into this huge, hairy beast. And because we have to be resourceful, we don't have $50,000 to build the most amazing costume. We had to be resourceful. So at that time, the fellow who was, I've worked with all the best effects guys over the years. Stan Winston, then he became, yeah. But so the fellow who I asked to help me with Meridian was Greg Cannon, who recently won many awards. Wonderful effects guy. I said, Greg, I need the most amazing costume. It's got to be perfect. He said, well, you can't afford that. He said, that's $50,000, $75,000. He said, but I can steal one for you that I made for Francis Ford Coppola, Dracula. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we'll do a new face, but the body, he doesn't know the difference. So if you ever see Coppola's Dracula, which I loved, I thought it was a terrific, it had flaws, I loved the movie. That when the creature, the hair, that's our creature from Meridian, just a different face. And he's the one who's making love to poor. I can make so many bad jokes in Italian, but must have been a super pipa experience because, you know, what else can you do? So Empire was doing great, and I was very close, obviously, to my dad. My dad used to, because he worked for Empire, but of course he was my dad too, and before I became movie guy, he supported the family and made movies in Italy and Spain and Yugoslavia and Sweden. But when Empire started, he worked for me. He used to call it reverse nepotism. I don't know how to translate that. But he was the best person to have as a right arm. I mean, they called him a veteran. You know, I could trust him. He would line produce some of the movies. If there was a trouble, he would go. But anyway, he says, look, through a friend, I met this fellow, Brian Usna, and he has on his team Stuart Gordon, who did theater in Chicago, and they have a project. They want to do a Lovecraft film and Reanimator. So they came in. They needed a distributor, and they needed a kind of a place to hang their hat. And it sounded good. I've given a lot of first-time directors a chance. Sometimes it works out well, and sometimes not well at all. Stuart's a first-time director, but he had the background of theater and in Chicago, and Usna seemed capable. So we made this deal. Empire was the distributor. I actually, this is a weird story, at a certain point when it was finished, before the final edit, they said, do you want like an executive producer credit? And I was making so many movies myself, directing, trancers, blah, blah, blah. I said, nah, it doesn't matter. I didn't take a credit, which is kind of probably stupid now, but that's all right. But people who know the history know that Empire and my dad were really involved. So what happened is the picture was, this is a long story. I'll tell you like 2 more minutes. We started shooting the movie. I came to set, and on day 2, as I did back then, we looked at the dailies. Today, it's a different experience. You look at a video, a DVD, or online. But back then, you sat in a screening room, and you watched your 35 millimeter material to see how and it looked terrible. It was badly lit. I thought, oh my God, this is because we had a commitment, because we had to release these movies with hundreds of thousands of dollars for prints and ads. It was an obligation. We had a big deal with Vestron Video, and it wasn't just, oh, we're going to distribute the movie. We had a financial commitment. And the movie looked pretty bad. So I said to Stuart and Brian, and my dad was there, I said, look, this rarely happens, but you have to regroup and you have to get rid of the DP. The DP is not, and the sound guy, and they say, what are your, the director of photography, critical. So Stuart, first-time director, was shocked, mortified. Oh no, because they have a relationship. I said, Stuart, he said, well, who do you suggest? I said, well, I think he's in Europe, but the best would be our best DP, Mac Albert, because Mac Albert did pretty much all the good Empire movies, starting with, I don't know, Parasite. Well, he was a Swedish, amazing, a great man and a great DP, and very gentle. And the first movie I made with him was Parasite with Demi Moore with 3D and blah, blah, blah. So I called Mac, and he was ready. He was on a vacation. He said, I'll come back. Stuart was not so sure. He said, I know Mac's great, but I feel really bad about it. I said, Stuart, the important thing is the movie. Yes, you have a relationship with this guy. Anyway, we brought in the A-team. Stuart, a sound guy, I think another art director, and then they started again, and they shot the movie. So the other story about Reanimator that if Stuart was here, he would tell you, is now Stuart's finished with the movie with an editor, And I look at it, as my dad did, and it was a half an hour longer than what it is, and it was truly a mishmash. It was either funny or not funny and weird and kind of, it was just a bizarre, his first movie, right? So everything he shot, he didn't cut anything, So we spent, my dad more than me, about 2 weeks in the editing room, trimming it down to the size it is now. And then, of course, we never knew how it would be. We finished it. We went to the Cannes Film Festival. We had a screening, the first screening, where that's good. Now we can hear me, maybe. It was packed. It was 1,000 people. People were screaming and yelling. I thought, oh my God, we have a hit. We have something unique. I forget what your question is, but. Well, then, of course, I should say, and after that, we made one after the other, From Beyond and Dolls, and then later on Pit and the Pendulum and Castle Freak. I mean, me and Stewart. Well, there's still fantasy films, which is what I like. I never wanted to make movies that were like slasher movies, and I don't think I've ever made a true horror movie, except maybe Castle Freak. Maybe Castle Freak is truly a scary movie. I think if creatures and monsters kind of do bad things, we even kids wind up watching all these movies, no matter what you do and how many ways you try to stop the TV. And I prefer for a kid to watch something like Puppet Master, where they know it's fantasy. Anyway, so I thought, I wanted to make some movies like Harry Potter-esque, tween movies that were fantasy but kids could watch. And what inspired me, the first one was Pre-Hysteria, is again, I was super close friend to Stan Winston. And Stan invited me over when they were getting ready to shoot Jurassic Park and showed me these amazing, a lot of it was CGI, but a lot of it was his huge, amazing creations. And I secretly read the script. I'm not sure how that happened. And it was violent. I mean, I could see this is a movie that kids couldn't see. It was a fantastic movie, nonetheless. So I thought we should maybe make a fantasy movie where that would be like Honey, I Shrunk the Dinosaurs, something that would be fun that kids could see. And we did it, and we released it at the same time as Jurassic Park, but on video. It was during those direct-to-video days, and I had a great relationship with Paramount. Full Moon was doing super well, and we created a new label called Moonbeam, and Pre-Hysteria was the first film. So I think it was either 92, 93. It was the most successful direct-to-video movie ever. They shipped like 100,000 units of rental at $50 or whatever it was. And then it sold, great times, and then they sold it to Disney. And then right after that, we made 7 more. We made Remote and Dragon World and Pre-Hysteria 2 and Pre-Hysteria 3 and blah, blah, blah. So that became a sister label to Full Moon. Fantasy films, but for kids. Well, I did it kind of, you learn. I mean, who's here? I'm just curious, who in this audience is interested in this thing? I mean, like the financial, you are, okay.
Luis is, for sure.
Okay. So I know this will sound really strange, but so I first started in the business. I made movies in the 70s, gave them to a theatrical distributor, got an advance, never saw any other money. Okay, so I learned, okay, if you're going to be prolific,
To make it clear, when you didn't see any other money,
revenues, royalty, nothing. They all talk a great game. Kid, here's some money. We're going to make a fortune. The movies did all well. I made a movie called Cinderella, which did very well. It was kind of a soft X-rated film. Laser Blast, Tourist. Anyway, we made these movies. Then I realized, okay, if I'm going to be prolific in this business, I need to control my own distribution. Otherwise, you give it to someone else. Unfortunately, it's a terrible business, and almost everyone is a thief. It's just the truth. In the truth, like a thief. So I started doing my own thing. It was the end of theatrical, very expensive, and I was lucky that my first movie was Ghoulies, and we released it through intermediaries, but we controlled it and released theatrically. It was a huge success for a small movie with the ghoulie coming out of the toilet, and it was a great campaign. And with that money and a few other things, I was able to start Empire. Empire eventually ended because I made the mistake, which I never made again, of getting involved with the bank, with the Credit Lyonnais Bank. And because they had a lot of power and they helped me buy the Dino De Laurentiis studio, they started saying, okay, you're making your movies, but you should distribute this movie, and we have a client, and he needs distribution. And then suddenly Empire, in the last few years, became a distribution company for not my movies. Not that my movies are so amazing, it's just they're a certain niche, and people know them, and then the numbers got worse, and suddenly I was being controlled by the bank, and I basically said in Italian, vaffanculo, and I sold Empire to the bank, but it went to another subsidiary. But luckily, I kept all the projects I was developing. I kept movies like Trancers, and all the movies I made in the 70s were mine. Okay. So I started Full Moon, and my idea for Full Moon is, one, the movies need to be our movies, my movies, and I would never again borrow money, ever, from anyone. Now that's not easy, you know, right? So Full Moon, now 30 years old, either expands or constricts based on cash flow. So every movie we've made for 30 years is on our cash flow. If it's a good year, like in the early 90s, we made 20 movies a year in 35 millimeter. Insane. We had 100 people. Then I bought a studio in Romania. Well, I built a studio in Romania. And then things got really bad again, and we got smaller, and the movies, instead of 20, 10, 9, 7, 4, 3, you know. And then the worst happened is the video store, the rental video store went out of business, and Blockbuster in Hollywood, we were their #1 independent supplier, closed, gone, finito. So there was a difficult year. I went on the road, I did tours, I did everything I could to try to stay connected to the fans. And then I was the first person, right after Netflix, to start a streaming site. And that's now slowly over 5 years, 4.5 years, has built into the new model that for us will allow us soon, I think, to make maybe 10, 15, 20 movies a year again. But the trick is you have, and yes, you can always fund one movie and get an investor, and I mean, there's a model for doing that. But if you're gonna, for me at least, if you're making small movies and you wanna survive, you know, you have to just make what you can afford. That was my lesson, having made so many movies before I started Full Moon. Because the movie we're shooting now is number 324. It sounds crazy, but we are now expanding. Now we're shooting 10 movies over the course of a year. But 3-4 years ago we shot 2 or 3.
That's
yes.
fantastic.
Yeah, well, but that's unique to what I do. I mean, I make small movies now. They're well crafted, and a lot of them I think look amazing, but they're still very small movies. So. So what I'm doing, again, everything I've done is sort of geared towards the fans because I've been very close over the years with the fans of these movies. When things got difficult towards the end of the good years for video, I went on the road and I did what was called a horror roadshow. I mean, I went to, over the 3 years, maybe 200 cities, so it was an insane amount of cities. I would rent, whether they're clubs or small theaters, we had anywhere from 300 to 800 people at every stop. And there were a few months I did 20 cities in 1 month, which is completely mad. But it was a crazy show where I did anecdotal stories. We showed videos. I had a guillotine. We cut girls' heads off. We had horror stars. People like Bill Shatner came, who's a friend, and Bill Moseley and poor Sid Haig. And so it was a horror show to try to stay connected with the audience. And then lucky this whole streaming thing began. So the idea of being into the fan side of this was super important to me because it's the fans that really saved the day for me in a certain way, because most of my colleagues are gone. They're in the real estate business in LA, probably a better business, but anyway, so what happened was in the early days of video, and when I had a great deal with Paramount, I insisted, I said, look, the fans are just like I was a fan of early Marvel comics, and I used to discover Stan's soapbox. You know, I became a friend of Stan Lee's and a friend of Jack Kirby's. But as a fan, back before the internet, you wanted to know who drew these amazing drawings and why was this particular, looking piece of art for Fantastic Four and maybe others looking similar. Then you learned it was Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko for Spider-Man. But when Stan started publishing back in the early 60s, this little column at the back of the comic book called Stan's Soapbox, he would say, hey, we're in here in the bullpen and Jack is drawing the Hulk and Ditko is drawing Dr. Mordred, and you began to understand the behind the scenes. So I got that idea when I started in Paramount. I said, look, we're making movies. They were very excited. They were making a lot of money. I said, I want to do a video zone, like a video magazine that would be at the end of every movie, which would show interviews with directors and actors. And they said, why? I said, well, because the fans, they'll have to know to go to the end of the tape. This is VHS, right? To watch this thing. I said, well, put it on the box, the video zone. And it turned out we had, over the first 3-4 years, like 10,000 letters. This is before email, really. Oh, my God, we saw the video zone. Sometimes we get a letter saying, we love your movies, but the video zone was way better than the movie, Because and then years later with DVD, everyone does behind the scenes. So this is my apropos your question, which is what are we doing now that's different? So there's a body of films, a series of films. They're all different. It's not a series. It's just 10 films. We're calling them the Deadly 10. Half of them are sequels to the more well-known franchises. We just shot another Puppet Master. We're making another Subspecies, not in Romania and Albania, just because You got to go where you can get more value for your dollars. Anyway, we're making these 10 movies, and I created a site that's deadly10.com. And we have our own streaming site, which is going really well, thank God. But deadly10.com is free, and what we're doing is every time we shoot a movie, I'm only looking at this dude here because he's interested in how to fund his movie. Anyway, every time we shoot a movie, we have a crew that shoots the movie, the standard thing. Then we have 2 other mini crews that shoot the live stream. So when you go to deadly10.com, when we're shooting a movie, for the entire production, it's live stream. It's not 5 minutes or 10 minutes. We just finished 10-day shoot on Blade. So when we get there in the morning at 8 and we finish at night, sometimes at 9, 13 hours live stream, 2 cameras. So as a fan, now some people fall asleep. It depends on your appetite for how much do you want to watch what it really is like being on a movie set. But we've now had about 10,000 people sign up. It doesn't cost anything, but you know who you are, right? Sign up to go on Deadly 10, and they've been watching us make these movies. So it's like the ultimate video zone. It's like you're there for the whole day, and it's free, and it's worldwide. So that's something that, again, the premise is people get excited. They see shooting whatever the movie is, and then they're going to want to at least see the movie, and then they're going to hopefully spend $6 and subscribe to our streaming site, which is crazy when you think you can subscribe to fullmoonfeatures.com, which is our brand new streaming site on all these platforms, for $6 and change a month. That's my entire life's work for $6. In a weird way, with the video store, you paid $2-3 to rent a movie. But streaming now, you get massive amount of movies for pennies.
We're also having in Brigadoon area, we're having all these Charles Band produced movies, basically like a retrospective it is. We can consider it that. So please feel free to go there. It's a free access area, and you can see and you can watch some of these movies we were talking about today. So please don't be shy. You're here.
Yeah, come on. There's just other people. Okay, this dude here. Okay, well, he's next. Ask the weirdest question. I don't care. Vai, Ricardo.
Maybe you can explain more your love for stop motion and tiny critters.
Okay. Okay, so I do love stop motion. And when I was first beginning to make movies in the 70s, I had this idea for Laser Blast about these aliens that come and they carelessly lose a gun, and the gun gets in the hands of a kid and blah, blah, blah. So if you've seen Laser Blast. But I wanted stop motion, and I found the Ray Harryhausen protege, who was pretty well known even in the 70s, a guy named David Allen. And I met Dave, and I said, look, small budget. I need like maybe 12 shots of these aliens. And we discussed it and agreed on a price, and he did the stop motion. And that began a long relationship with David Allen, fantastic animator. We did Daytime Ended, and then later on, of course, he did Shots and Dolls and the Puppet Master stop motion shots. During this whole period, Dave said, look, I'm going to do this for you at a good price, but I have a project I want us to make together one day. You can't afford it because it's a big project and Full Moon makes little movies, but when you can afford it, it's called The Primevals. And he gave me the script, and we worked on the script. And it, unlike our pictures that we usually shoot 2 or 3 weeks max, this was 12-week shoot. Had to build sets in Romania, had to go to the Italian Dolomites. And then, of course, the most expensive part was after 12 weeks of shooting, when you've spent all this few $1 million, then it was 2 years of stop-motion animation shots. Because as you know, one frame, it's a long, long process. So there were 250 shots planned, 2 years. And about 150 shots into that 2-year project, Dave Allen dies of cancer. It was also the same time when things got difficult for Full Moon, for everyone in our industry. So we put everything in a big box, kind of, to wait till we could afford again to finish Primevals, which happened about 6 months ago. So 6 months ago, we unpacked. I did a deal with Dave Allen's protege, who went on to do other things. He found a few people who still knew how to do stop motion, which is an art form. And we're now 6 months into 12 months, roughly, of finishing Primevals, which will be out sometime next year. So that's an exciting end to the stop motion story. But when you think of it, Dave showed me the project in the early 70s. We shot it in 92, and it's going to be released in 2020. That's a long, long stretch. But anyway, I love stop motion. And I love little creatures. Yeah, I love little creatures. This is a crazy question.
I just turn that.
Yes, go.
Hello, welcome to Sitges. It's a great honor to have you here. I have 2 questions, actually. as an action figures collector myself, I've been really curious about how these ideas for Puppet Master came to, not to your head, to the director's head and the user's head. I don't
Right.
know. For me, it's like what happened if my action figures suddenly woke up, and it's a kind of weird Toy Story.
Oh, let me ask you this: you have action figures, a collection.
Yeah.
Do you have a girlfriend?
Yeah, believe it or not, yeah. Believe
Okay.
it or not, yeah.
So, most of all these ideas and stories come from my head. Now, I then, of course, go to writers. I don't direct every movie. I've directed maybe 50 of the 300-odd movies. And depending on the time, I go to great effects guys who can create what is needed. I've been involved, as I said, with Stan Winston and Greg Canham and blah, blah, blah. So the story of Puppet Master is actually interesting for anyone who's going to create anything, because ultimately it is a collaborative world. I couldn't build a puppet. I have ideas, but I wouldn't know how to build it. I'm not an animator. I write a storyline. I don't write a script. I can direct. I can't really act. I stopped that when I was 5 or whatever. So the way Puppet Master worked is I collect images and ideas, sometimes mine, sometimes sketches that I have artists do, just like in a box, but it was a big box, several boxes. And in the 80s, I made a movie I was proud of called Dolls, which was a big doll movie. I don't know if you saw Dolls. Stuart Gordon directed it. It was released. Okay. And even though I was happy with the movie, I wanted to make another puppet or doll movie that could be a franchise that had characters that could become more than just the one. Because Dolls is kind of a beautiful movie, but when it ends, it's over. You can't really, to make Dolls 2 would be kind of weird. It doesn't have the right protagonist, and there's too many dolls. And so I started doing these sketches, and I had ideas for each of the puppets. They didn't look at all like they look now. I had a samurai sort of ninja with 6 arms. Blade I had a really pretty girl with leeches. These are sketches or ideas. And then I was thinking, okay, this is the end of Empire, and I needed to make a very strong movie for the first movie for Full Moon, 1989. And I went to the artist I was using the most, illustrator, a guy named Lee McLeod. He did all the art, the early Full Moon art, very distinctive. And I said, look, Lee, he did this before for me. I said, I have these sketches. I had this idea, I don't know the title yet, but I want it to be World War II, so I want these characters to be in a trunk, and just give me a rendering so they'd look unified, so I can then talk to effects guys, talk to a distributor. I need to show something, not just sketches. So we worked it out, and I still have it. It's a piece of black and white art, which I should have with me and show you, but I don't. And he put his own spin on some of these things, but it was pretty close to my sketches, all beautifully done in an old steamer trunk. And then somewhere in that period, I needed a title, and I'm very good with titles. So I love the word master because I had good success with Dungeon Master and all that stuff. So I thought, Puppet Master, why not? Okay. So then I decided on making the movie. So this is before writer or director. So then I go to David Allen, my stop motion, guy. I said, David, this is going to be World War II, Puppet Master. I'm going to get a script written. Here's the basic idea. But you need to develop these because they have to be authentic to the period. Even though I had ideas, I didn't think that the ninja was right, and then the leech woman was more like a 50s, 60s sexy chick. So he, very smart, did the research, and he said, I think we should turn 6-shooter into a cowboy, be a 6-shooter, and that's what a marionette or a puppeteer in the 40s, they would have had a cowboy and a sexy 20s style flat. Anyway, he came back with the designs for the 7 or 6 puppets. We had 7. We had Torch, but then I saved Torch for the next movie. So from an idea to sketches to a piece of art to Dave Allen then developing, and he had to develop them into stop motion animation and rod puppets because we had to bring them on set because I hate CGI. I'm bad with CGI. And I want my effects to be organic. If an actor is screaming, you want them screaming not at a light or a green screen. You want them screaming at a nasty leech woman, So all those shots are all done on set. They just get out of the business. It's like the worst business. No, I don't know. You've heard from many people who can describe it better than me. People just persevere. They go and they get lucky or they don't get lucky. It is a crazy business, not to be in control at all of your destiny because you go to auditions and yes, question, gentleman there. Oh, I'm sorry. Then this guy's next. Yes. Who am I looking at?
Yeah.
Oh, you. Okay, fine. Yes, I understand. Go. You know, not that every movie I've made has got a soul. I think most of them do, because I love these movies. I mean, I want to make movies that I enjoy, because I sit there now 15, 20, 30 years later with my kids or other friends, and you have to sit through these movies again. Nothing's worse than sitting through a movie that you were embarrassed about 30 years ago, because now it's just a nightmare. So I've never made, again, I've tried to make original movies too, not copycat movies. As I said earlier, I never wanted to make a slasher movie. You know, I want to make something that, I mean, I made weird movies, and they've followed me forever in a good way, like Head of the Family. I mean, that's a bizarre movie, and Hideous, and weird movies that are original and different. So yeah, I think they do have a little soul in them. And you know, Asylum, it's like a factory. You know, they make a few good movies, but I don't want to. Everyone speaks badly of other filmmakers or distributors, and I don't want to do that. Okay, repetitive meaning, oh my God, why did I make it? Or it sucks, or yeah, sure. 324 movies. But they feel like your children, though. And people say, what's your favorite movie? I mean, I have 4 kids. I'm not going to tell you who my favorite kid is. You know? But of those movies, there are a lot that I'm very proud of. But what was the first question? That was a good one. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, the TV series. So I'm going to address this, but I'm going to look at you too. Okay? So you also have to learn, and I don't know a good expression other than stick to your own knitting, which means do what you know you do best. What I've done, I think I'm pretty good at. I like making small movies. I like not owing money to anybody. I like being independent. I like dreaming up a movie and knowing I can get a script written in 30 days, I can shoot in 60 days, and I can release it 3 months later. So that's what I do. There's temptation to do other stuff, right? And right now, I'm lucky that we have 2 big studios that I can't mention because of disclosure, blah, 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 who have optioned to make, in one case, a big studio transfers. So that's a movie now that may be made, not by me. I get, much like the other thing, I get a check, and that's fine, and I get executive producer credit. But this is big movie time, where the movie could be great. And if it does well, it brings another audience, you know, to the Full Moon original movies. So the answer is, I just like to do what I'm doing. And I could try, you know, series is a bigger financial commitment. You have to make 6 or 8 or 10, you know. Maybe someone will come to me and say, look, we have the right funding. We want to make whatever the movie is, a transfer series, and maybe. But I'm just sticking to what I know that I can do. Because this year we're making 10 movies. That's a lot of movies. And I'm sure a few will be good and different, and a few first-time directors. So I stick to what you do best. This business is a crazy business, and it changes, you know. The cycles change very, very quickly. Our films are being made for the cappuccino budget of a $100 million movie, you know. So the answer is our movies are character-driven, you know, and I want to make this short because I'm sure there's other people coming. You know, we go to see every big movie. We have to, you know, every movie. You know, we got to go see it. And recently, they've been generally not so good. And recently, I think, really hard to watch. You feel like you're getting hammered on the head with endless CGI effects, endless explosions. How many times can we see an ocean crush a city and buildings fall? And it's beautifully done. I mean, but who cares? You know, you care about people. So the advantage you have, that we have as clever filmmakers, is to make character-driven, interesting ideas, and they can be sci-fi too. I mean, Trancers is the perfect example, I think, of a clever movie. It's well written. There's almost no CGI. There's no CGI. There's almost nothing requires a lot of money. You know, it's not a time machine he gets into. He travels into his ancestor's body. It's clever and character-driven. You care about the people. If you don't care about the people, I don't think you have a movie. You spend $200 million on some big crazy movie, and you don't care. So you should develop the ideas that are practical. You know, you can't have 1,000 people. You can't. You know, you have to be smart about it. But I think clever sci-fi, fantasy, horror movies there's so many that can be made that just require talent. That's the biggest thing lacking is talent. The problem also is that kids today, not you guys, but you know, in the 70s and the 60s before I started, you made a movie on 35 millimeter, you had to spend at least $150,000, $200,000. Even if everyone worked for free, you had the cost of negative, of cameras, of gear, of the lab. The price of entry was a lot of money. And therefore, usually people who made movies had some bona fides. They worked in theater. They brought to the investors a package that said, yeah, I've done this and I assisted here. Today, a kid with $3,000 buys some gear and it looks like a DVD cover. Okay. Oh, the titles look good. Then, then it's a terrible movie because they don't know how to write. They're not a director. The actors are their friends from school. You know what I'm saying? So if you have talent, I'm sorry that was a loud, I'm sorry, it scared me. If you have talent, you can do amazing things, but you need the training. Otherwise, everyone who said that to you about $20, $30 million, they're wrong, completely wrong. And one more thing I should mention, is that it, finito? No, I just want to mention that so the world's changed. We were big home video rental helped everyone for many years. The 80s were very organic movies, I think, and that was, again, before CGI. So I think a lot of the movies that we loved, that we watched at the video store, were very well made in a sense and very original in the 80s. And then the minute more effects came in and more people who had less training, then they became, they're still pretty good in the 90s. Now it's hard, I think, to find something original that can be made for very little money. And of course, the medium is different. The 80s, it was VHS and the video rental store and then DVD, and now that's over. So we as Full Moon are trying to pull people into our streaming site, which is like publishing a magazine. If a movie does very well and a lot of people watch it, you can see how many people viewed it, but there's no financial gain. It just helps you because people say, wow, that's a cool streaming site, we should subscribe. Just like if a great writer writes an article in Playboy, which they did years ago, they would sell more magazines. It wasn't that. Whereas our whole training is you release Trancers or Reanimator on DVD or VHS, and we shipped 100,000 or 50,000 units. That was a lot of money. So today it's completely different. You have to find the fans again to pull them into the streaming site. But once they're there, it's great. You can do things we can never do on video. Behind the scenes, live streaming, crazy stuff. Everyone who subscribes to our streaming site, which is called fullmoonfeatures.com, I have to say, and she's actually got some in Spanish, I like that, little thingies. We also know who you are, which is kind of, that's the problem with the internet, right? We know that you watch Trancers, but you stop in 20 minutes. Why did that happen? You can find the analytics out. It's very interesting. So hopefully that helps us make better movies and know more what the audience wants, But the world, in that sense, is drastically different. But the movie is still the same. It's still got to be a good script and a writer and actors and blah, blah, blah. You have a few of those you can give to the people worldwide? Oh, she's got it. Oh, that's we didn't bring many. I didn't realize so many of you.
Wow, it was fabulous having you.
Yeah, we could go forever.
Figure as Charles Mann. And I think we have a pretty nice amount of headlines here from what you said. But I will especially hear that we have people that is interested in cinema and also from the educational side or as fans only. But definitely listening to you is so clear and it's quite obvious, but at the end of sometimes we forget this. And at the end of the day, cinema is the product or the produce of the clash between the business model and the artistic side.
Right.
And without one or the other, it doesn't exist. If you think only about business, you finally become a hack. If you think only about the artistic side, you become naive.
That's very good. Wow, that's a good speech. Give him a hand. It's true. It's true.
So definitely, I think you are the epitome of the example of how this business still exists, especially in the fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, David. Thank you. This is Robin Sidney, who's a fantastic actress, and I'm lucky enough to say my girlfriend of 15 years. But has anyone here, she's made a bunch of movies for me. She also made movies like The Lost, all these crazy films over the years. But has anyone here seen Ginger Dead Man, Gary Busey, as a crazy cookie?
Only the poster, but I've seen it, definitely.
She's the one who the cookie chases in the bakery, in case you've seen it. There's many other movies, but I wanted you to say hi to these nice people.
You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
La sesión se tiene que poner otra vez en la cola, ¿vale? Porque aquí tienen que preparar la sala. Gracias.
This is from a piece of art concept before we did the toilet. Robin Sidney.
Robin. Sorry. Que se tiene que ir. Ya tú has firmado 4.000 veces ya. Ya está, ho sento. Ja està.